we'll be talking about tax equity. And in tax equity, basically we mean that there should be a very fair and equitable distribution of tax burden. And fair and equitable distribution of tax burden among whom? The taxpayers. So every taxpayer should feel like that there is tax equity, that whatever burden of taxation falls onto their shoulder, it is equitable, it is fair into practice. And for the same, the government has, you have observed that in 2016 itself, the government has launched the income declaration scheme. That means government has given up, one time you can sort of say an opportunity to the people that they can simply disclose their income, pay for the taxes, right, whatever income they being generated from whatever sources. So they were given that opportunity that they can disclose their income, pay off the respective charges, and they can be escaped from the penal provisions. That means no scrutiny will happen, nobody is going to put up any penal provisions onto them, no other stringent action will happen, because this is a sort of a amnesty principle, or you could say a benefit which is given so that all those who were evading the taxes, they are given a chance to an opportunity so that they can disclose their income and can come under the ambit of income tax, right? So that, it promotes the tax equity among all the people. And how can it be done? Either we can follow the stick and carrot approach, right? Or the other one is that we try to provide those amnesties to those people who have been, since long been evading the taxes. So let's just provide them that opportunity. That is what is the intent of the government. They call for the people, they started this income declaration scheme where it was a general public thing wherein this thing has been intimated to all the people out large that you have this opportunity in case somebody is having income for which no source or no legal source can be mapped out. So for that they can simply do what is, they can disclose their income and pay the respective charges onto the same. So the intent behind the same for the government is that we have a better tax compliance system. We are making sure to create such an income wherein this concentration of economic power, it is not in few hands. That gap of richer and poor should not get widened up. So that is why to fix that thing, to bridge that thing and to reflect a good tax system, the government made sure, to provide this these amnesties. So herein the very funda behind your tax equity concept is that these tax payments, they should be based on to the amount of your benefits received. So whosoever person is receiving the greater set of benefit, corresponding liability should be imposed onto that person. As simple as it is, right? So it says that way we are coming to what? We are coming to a very fair system. We are coming to such a system which reflects the good tax system or its characteristics, right? So that is why all the benefits being linked to the income that the person is generating. How do we segregate this concept of tax equity? Basically, this tax equity are of two types, your horizontal tax equity and vertical tax equity. Now, in case of your horizontal tax equity, it means in the similar economic circumstances, the taxpayer should bear the same tax burden. That means if the circumstances are same, right? You are generating the income from salary, or let's suppose two people are generating the income from the salary, right? Their salaries are same, right? Other factors corresponding to, let's suppose, deductions, exemptions are same, then they should bear the same burden. So that is your horizontal tax equity, right? Another one is your vertical tax equity, which says the taxpayers in dissimilar economic circumstances should bear dissimilar tax burden. यानी कि जिनके tax circumstances जो हैं या economic circumstances जो हैं differ कर रहे हैं, तो उनका टैक्स बर्डन भी डिफर करना चाहिए, जैसे हम इनकम टैक्स में कहते हैं कि अगर जो ज्यादा अर्न कर रहा है स्लैब के हिसाब से दे आर सपोज टू पे more, which is also ability to pay principal. Who is earning more, he is having the more ability to pay, so your ability to pay principal applies and that leads to your tax equity. And if a person who is earning less should bear the lesser burden of taxes. That is what is known as your vertical tax equity, wherein the taxpayers who are falling into the dissimilar economic circumstances, they should bear the dissimilar tax burden. And when we talk from the point of view of your redistribution of income within a society, we pay more emphasis on to the vertical. As vertical tax equity, it's actually the more important form, because we say that, most of the time the economic circumstances are different among different taxpayers. So that is why the tax burden that they bear, it should be dissimilar. It should not also be the same, right? Now, as I have talked again and again on to what is the direct relationship between the tax revenues and the economic growth, as we discussed previously also, that greater tax revenues will help in promoting the stability in the economy, will help promoting the economic growth, right? It will push your GDP ratios. So, that is also a sign of positive economic growth. Now, tax to GDP ratios, these actually represent the size of the tax revenue that the government is generating, right, which is as a percentage of your GDP. So, the higher this tax to your GDP ratio, it is considered the better will be the financial position of a country, right. So, basically the primary objective of any tax policy is to mobilize the resources of the public sector for the public sector, so that to finance welfare and developmental plans. Now, when we say this tax GDP ratio, that means whatever tax revenues you are generating, right, the total of the same, direct, indirect revenues that you are generating, so they bear to some measure of your national income, because the level of your taxation in a country, it is basically judged with respect to the ratio which these taxes bear to your measure of national income. And this very ratio of your tax GDP ratio, right, you could say if any change happens to the same, it is either because there being a change into your tax revenue or because there being a change into national income, right. And as a rule we say जितना ज़्यादा होगा ये रेशो उतना बेटर है, रीजन बीइंग वो उतना ज्यादा इंडिकेट कर रहा है कि आपकी टैक्स कलेक्शन ज्यादा है और उसका ग्रेटर इम्पैक्ट पड़ रहा है किसके ऊपर, जीडीपी के ऊपर, दैट रिफ्लेक्ट्स योर इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ. सो when we are finding this tax GDP ratios, there are various concerns which are associated with the same. For example, the social security contributions and what is going to be the measure of this national income, whether we are going to consider the gross national product or whether we are going to consider the gross domestic product or the net national product, or whether this national income is to be computed at the market prices or the factor cost. So these are the factors that one needs to take into care when we are ascertaining the tax to GDP ratio. So basically what we take as a normal rule is we take the GDP at the market prices for computing these tax to GDP ratio. So your formula is whatever tax revenues you are generating, you divide the same by the GDP at the market prices. So GDP at the market prices will serve as your denominator and the total tax revenues will serve as the numerator, right? Why do we take this GDP at market prices as a denominator? Because it basically avoids the estimations of your depreciation, which is again subject to various statistical computation, and in this manner we are better able to, you can say, analyze the trends into taxation. So basically this entire tax GDP ratio, it's an indicator. It indicates the relative tax burden over the time period, or you can simply go for time series analysis also when you are seeing it for the time period, and when you are seeing it for the same period between different sections of the economy, then it is considered as a cross section analysis. So basically आपका जो टैक्स जीडीपी रेशियो है, इट इंडिकेट्स अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स. सो इट इज generated to reflect the economic growth, economic stability, your total tax revenues, its impact onto the GDP ratios. You can see the impact over the time period using time series analysis, or you can see it for the very same period using the cross section analysis, right? Now, so this is about your tax GDP ratio, that how much crucial the tax revenues are there for an economy, for the healthy growth of an economy. Now, with respect to this taxation only, Adam Smith, he gave 4 canons of taxation, right? Canons of taxation means what should be the guiding principles and rules when we are trying to come up with the tax policy or a tax structure for the tax collection system. Because if we want our tax collection system to be very effective, to be a one which is pragmatic, to be a one which is very functional, so it says that there are these 4 canons, that means the 4 characteristics which Adam Smith classified as canons of taxation into his book Wealth of Nation. Now, what are these canons of taxation? The first very canon of taxation is your canon of economy. Now, it says कि आपका जो टैक्स स्ट्रक्चर हो वो इस तरीके से आपका स्ट्रक्चर हो कि उसमें जितना पॉसिबल हो पेपर वर्क कितना भी आपका कम से कम हो, राइट? बिकॉज व्हाट विल हैपन इफ यू विल हैव लीस पेपर वर्क, more and more people will find it convenient to file the returns. So when we talk about tax, everybody says it is ambiguous, right? So that ambiguity government has tried to reduce. Why what? Government is trying to come up with the simpler version of filing your ITR. Now presently you can file the ITR using the SMS facility also, right? You can go to these tax mitras also to file your return. So government has simplified it. Earlier it used to be very voluminous one. Now it has been very simplified one. And if the tax return is simplified one, then obviously you need correspondingly lesser administrative expenses, because in order to collect the taxes you need to indulge a great amount for the administrative costs. So you need to indulge more number of staff, you need to incur more number of costs so as to collect the taxes from the people, right? And that is why it says the taxation structure should be in one which is economical, which is simplified, which engages the least number of your staff, which make sure that administrative cost is also low. That means the cost of collecting the tax revenues, right? The second canon of is your canon of equality. Now, equality says that everybody should pay as per their ability to pay. So that is why we discuss beforehand that what is the ability to pay or what is the tax equity. And herein when we discussed, we talked about that this ability to pay, that means every person should pay whatever is permissible or proportionate according to its respective abilities, right? And that is what is your very core principle of tax equity also, that the people in dissimilar circumstances should bear the tax burden in dissimilar manner, right? So, canon of equality say that economic justice should be there. There should be tax equity. Everyone should pay according to their own ability to pay for the same, right? Third one is your canon of certainty. Canon of certainty means that whatever taxes the individual is bound to pay, he should be certain about the same. As you very well know that you need to file the income tax return in the before the 31st July of the assessment year, right? So that means you are very certain about that what are the dates, right? And they should not be arbitrary. They should be very much well planned, that okay, this is your date of filing the return, this is the penalty that you need to pay, this is the due date for your advance payments, or this is the date for filing the revised return or a belated return. So that ways you can see that our tax structure is already having this very canon of certainty imbibed into the same. Next one is your canon of convenience. That means every tax structure should be constructed in such a manner it is convenient, because when we talked about this canon of economy, we talked about that it should be economical in a manner that everybody feel convenient. So that convenience is the most important thing when we are drafting or structuring any tax policy, right? See, for example, buying a luxurious goods, because onto the luxurious goods you can see a greater bracket of your GST is levied onto the same. So now buying a luxurious thing is your choice. It's not something which comes under the necessity. So that ways one can opt to buy those luxurious things or not. It's totally choice, right? And otherwise, if we see for the necessity goods, either they are the GST rate is comparatively much lower, or they are zero rated, right? So that means this canon of convenience should be there with the people, that if they do not want to buy the luxurious goods, then the heavier rate of taxes are not applied to them. So these are the four canons of our taxation structure which have been proposed by the Adam Smith, right? Now another the person known as Musgrave. So Musgravian's principle are also related to how a good tax system should be. So he talks about all the crucial points of a good taxation system. The first very thing it talks about that the taxation structure should be equitable in approach. So right now we talked about this tax equity. So this is the first very point or the foremost point for any tax structure, that it should be equitable. The tax structure should be fair enough. It should be able to deliver the justice to the individuals, right? The burden should be according to the ability to pay principle, right? So that's the first very you could say characteristics according to Musgrave for a good taxation system. Second, it says minimizes interference with tax burden. So that means that the tax structure should not be ambiguous. It should be very certain. It should be structured in such a manner that there is not enough of tax burdens. It is very simply structured. It is very coherent in approach, right? So that ways it reduces the interferences. And then furthermore it says, if given for providing incentives which are your investment incentives, it should be done with minimum interference with equity of the system. इसका मतलब ये हुआ कि when we are saying that these incentives are floated for the benefit of the companies or the benefit of the individuals, वो उस तरीके से structured होने चाहिए कि कहीं ना कहीं उससे आपकी टैक्स इक्विटी के ऊपर इम्पैक्ट ना हो. यानी कि ये ना हो कि इंसेंटिव्स देने के चक्कर में a person is paying none of the taxes and the other person is bearing a greater share of your taxes. So that is why you can say the government plans your incentives in such a manner कि उससे एक टैक्स पैरिटी, टैक्स इक्विटी सिस्टम में बनी रहे, राइट? एंड दैट इज व्हाई यू कैन सी फॉर कि आपका जो टैक्स हॉलिडे पीरियड भी है वो एक लिमिटेड टाइम पीरियड तक है, right? Because government also wants to develop those areas, wants to go for the growth of the economy, but it also keeps into mind that the structure should be such which is promoting the tax equity. Similarly, it says tax system should facilitate use of fiscal policy for stabilization and growth objectives. Now that means that आपका जो टैक्स सिस्टम है वो इस तरीके से स्ट्रक्चर्ड होना चाहिए कि इट इज प्रोमोटिंग द स्टेबिलिटी ऑफ द इकोनॉमी, राइट? एज वी टॉक्ड अबाउट कि आपकी जो टैक्स जीडीपी रेशियो में हमारा इंटेंट क्या रहता है, टैक्स स्टेबिलिटी, जो इकोनॉमिक स्टेबिलिटी है, इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ हो, इन्वेस्टमेंट्स जो है वो बूस्ट हो, एंड दैट कैन ओनली बी पॉसिबल इफ वी हैव वेल डिफाइंड, राइट, delineated fiscal policies, and जिसका core thrust area क्या हो, growth objectives of the economy, right? Similarly, fair administration, that means कि आपका जो administrative practices हैं, they should be fair enough. They should not be manipulating, no corruption should happen into the same. That is what is a core reflection of a good taxation system, जहाँ fair हो, बिल्कुल transparent हो. As you can see that due to digitalization, you can gauge into that, yes, this is the invoice issued by so and so, your person seller, and he is the person who is receiving the same. These are the person who generated these e-way-bills. So everything is very structured, right? And if the things are so structured, and if that principle or that canon of convenience economy is being followed, then there will be lower administrative and compliance costs. So that is, the 6 core characteristics which are proposed by the Musgrave for a good tax system, and which, if you would compare all these things, if you just make a quick analysis of Adam Smith's canons of taxation or Musgravian's good taxation system characteristics, you would simply see that all it talks about is the simplicity in a tax structure, right? It talks about the convenience, it talks about lower administrative costs, that means economy. It talks about as much as possible the structure should be transparent, and it promotes your tax equity. And finally is that it should be focused around the growth of the economy, right? It should be structured in such a manner that it is promoting the growth of a nation. So these are the core essentials for any tax system, whether we talk about your direct taxes or your indirect taxes. So this is what we basically talk about, that they should be structured, the policy should be made in a manner that as much as possible convenience should be provided, should be given to the citizens, to the individuals. Then only there will be more of tax planning, and there will be lesser and lesser cases for tax evasion, and there will be better compliance through your tax management, and people will not go for tax avoidance by using the loopholes or by using that art of dodging the taxes, right? So that is why today's segment actually looms around your this thing, that which talks about good taxation structure, its must, or what are the things which we should not follow while creating a tax policy, and what are the the core differences between your tax planning, your avoidance, evasion, tax management, right? So basically through this we come to know about that this is how a good tax system is being structured. And if we take the benefits of the system in a well-defined manner, that will be purely legal, that will be promoted by the government, and government will always acknowledge you for such things, because you are a one who is the abiding citizen, right? So that is why the person should not resort to tax evasion or tax avoidance, because these are not at all ethical in approach. And when it comes to tax evasion, it is purely illegal. That is why there are stringent actions, policies and penalties for such thing, right? Similarly, the tax system should be as much as possible an equitable one. That means the taxes should be levied according to the ability to pay principle. That means whatever is your paying capacity, you should pay according to the same. There should not be dissimilar or disproportionate burden onto a person who otherwise is liable to pay a lesser amount. So that is what we consider as the core elements of a good taxation structure. And when we talk about tax management means that you are complying with the rules and regulations of the taxation structure in a well-defined manner by filing the returns well in time, by making sure to respond to every notices, in case generated, or sometimes the government issue you notice, and the person is very not concerned about the things that he consider, or gets scared at times also. So that thing should not be there, that fear should not be there. If you are right onto your path, you should follow you are following the right practices, then you should not be scared of anything, right? And you should see on to what is the thing, like what are they asking, and you should respond to that thing. So that's also one part of your tax management. So one must keep into mind the characteristics of a good tax system and the core differences between tax planning, tax evasion, tax avoidance before proceeding further for any taxation structure of the economy, whether it is direct taxes or your indirect taxes. So thank you for the day.